Welcome back to Grace Stories. This is Garrett from Grace Community Church, and I'm really glad that you're here watching, listening, and doing all of those things. Given what we're doing now as a church, we celebrated the 25th anniversary a few weeks ago with the worship night, and we're doing some different things. And I figure that since we can't do anything super extravagant, we can't have, a parade or tents or anything like that, that's something that might be beneficial for the church and just, I think, interesting to hear is a little bit from Rod and Cindy about their experience here at the church and some of the things involved with that, and all of that kind of in the spirit of our 25th anniversary. I figure what better time to do it than now. And so, I'm really glad that you guys took the time to come into Rod's office.
Here we are.
And record this and just share a little bit of the story that some people might not know. And I've been here for 5 years. I've gotten to hear bits and pieces of it, but who knows? There might be some stuff that I don't even know. And so, feel free to just kind of jump in whenever you guys feel like it. And to just start off the scene, the questions. When you started the church, and you came here, what were you doing before that?
Well, so Teo, why don't we back up to July of 1987? Because we were living in Baltimore, and I had just spoken at Grace Fellowship Church in Baltimore, and the senior pastor there had mentioned my name in a message, and Jeff Grisham came up to me. We came up to the pastor and said, "Where's Rod McElvain?" And so he said, "He's right over there." So Jeff Grisham and I reconnected. We were college friends in the same fraternity. We reconnected after 10 years in Baltimore. And we became great friends. Jeff and Mary Ann, Cindy and I, we had, I think they had one at the time, we had four. And we became great friends. And he was in a surgical fellowship there in ophthalmology. And he mentioned, we think it might be really awesome to think about a new church in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And so, we had always lived in large cities, we're talking New York and Chicago, and Cindy was born in, San Diego and lived in Indianapolis. And so the thought of us coming to Bartlesville, no way, forget it. So you fast forward 4 years, we were in Dallas, and we had 4 kids, and I was the associate pastor at Fellowship Bible Church. And the question came up again about coming to Bartlesville. And we were very open to it at the time. And so we had this history really that dated back to our college years. It was really our connection with Jeff Grisham and that renewed relationship with Jeff and Mary Ann that led us to even think about coming to Bartlesville.
Yeah. I think that it's really interesting, and my hope is to, in maybe some other episodes, explore the other side of that, experience and conversation. But the idea that, it didn't start off as a big thing. It started off as something that was small. And you talk a little bit about some of your guys's, experiences in other churches and things. For people that don't know, what were some of the, for both of you, what were some of the experiences that you had, different churches that you had been at, and different kinds of roles? What did some of those look like over the years, and maybe kind of leading you into the ministry that you started here?
Well, I was 10 years in a parachurch organization called Search Ministries, and Search Ministries did lifestyle evangelism in the business and professional community. And I love that. It was, I think, great for us as a couple, although I was working many, many nights of the week. There was not sort of the pressure of being a senior pastor of a church. And so that was great for us in the early years. And so I did it for 10 years, didn't know that I would do anything different, really. And then we planted a church in Los Angeles for about 14 months. And we had, it was really transformative experience for us because taught me a lot about leadership, taught me a lot about, I just plunged into the whole church planting thing, but it was not a good place for our family. And so we then went to Dallas, and I was the associate pastor at Fellowship Bible Church in Dallas. And that was a fabulous experience for both of us. And then, along the way, that church plant was not a lot of fun in California. We learned a lot, but it was pretty.
Yeah, it was
pretty rough for our family.
It was pretty rough, and I think I came away from that time in California like, okay, no more church planting, no more pastoring a church. I really liked, at least for me and for our kids, just having a more behind the scenes influence in what Rod was doing. So, when we first got married and Rod joined the staff of Search Ministries, that was just great because there was just no pressure on the family. But then after that experience in California, I got a little soured on being part of a church and a church staff.
So we had a great 3 years at Fellowship Bible Church of Dallas, and then we started working with the Bible study that was the foundation for this church here, which is a group of 5 couples and maybe 1 or 2 singles. And so I came back from the retreat. It was November the 11th, 1994. I came back from the retreat that we had, fantastic retreat. And I said to Cindy, I said, hey, if we ever plant a church again, I'd really want to do it with these people. And she looked at me like, and we never will.
I said, well, if you ever plant a church again, you're doing it alone because I'm not going with you.
I'm doing it single. And so at the time, Cindy was the spiritual gifts coordinator, I think, at Fellowship Bible Church of Dallas. And so they wanted her to go up and do the spiritual gifts assessment. She went up there. And in fact, that was the week
to Bartlesville.
Up to Bartlesville. That was the week of the Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah.
And she was up in Bartlesville while that happened. And so she came back, and Monday morning, we're having a coffee together. Cindy's holding our dog in her lap, and she said, Rod, if we ever plant a church again, these would be the people I want to do it with. It was like the exact same words, So we really felt God's incredibly strong leadership as we began to explore the possibility of leaving the big city, and coming to Bartlesville.
Yeah, I think, that a lot of people, maybe they wouldn't know that background of the fact that you guys had done different things in different churches or parachurch, organizations. And, it doesn't matter always like where it is or what the circumstances can definitely affect things, but planting a church, trying to do something without a group of people that are, not only providing support, emotionally, spiritually, but financially, and some of the other things that are involved with running a church, doing something like that without, that large group, can be difficult. And that's how.
So
what
was really unique about this was that when we planted a church in California, it was probably the most difficult kind of church to plant. Coming here was probably the ideal situation. And the reason why was because every person who was part of that initial Bible study, every person had been discipled. They had grown in their faith in a small group setting. And so there was this incredible value for community. And every time we got together, I felt like, it was spiritual. It was visionary. There was a sense of, hey, we're gonna do this. We're gonna make this happen. In God's power, we're gonna make this happen. And so the first, I'd say 4 or 5 years, the elders of our church almost functioned as if they were staff. And that was an amazing experience for Cindy and I. And then I think we were probably 4 years into it before you joined the staff.
Right.
And
when we came over to built the building.
Yeah, Manny Files was our first real employee actually before I came, because she did our kids ministry and was our administrative assistant. But Cindy came on as our children's ministry director. And so I will tell you that one of the great joys of my married life is getting to work with Cindy for 20 years. Like I think about that all the time. And 14 years of that was it 14? Probably Celebrate Recovery. Yeah. And her involvement in Celebrate Recovery completely changed our lives, our marriage, our family. I love to tell people, the thing that shifted our family is Celebrate Recovery. We tell a lot of people, look, we're a recovery family. We started with our marriage, and we worked the steps together. Our kids saw the differences in us. They were drawn into a higher level of authenticity. So, truly, like I look back in the last 25 years and I think working with her was truly an amazing joy.
Yeah, you mentioned, your kids and your family, and I believe at the time of recording this, it hasn't happened yet, but you guys are going to be sharing, your testimony for CR's 15th anniversary. But for some people, for context, when you guys finally decided, this is something that we need to do as a family, we need to go to Bartlesville. What year was it, and how old were you guys and your kids at the time?
So I'm 39, Cindy's 37. Our kids are 15, 12.
Yeah, 10 and 8.
10 and 8, yeah. Yeah. And we told them we're moving to Bartlesville. They were ticked. They were
the girls were. The boys were young enough; they didn't care.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the girls were like, okay, they were upset. Yeah. We just put new windows in our house in Dallas.
Oh yeah.
And I think shortly after we said something, our daughter one night, she lifted up the new windows that were easy to open, got out, went over to a friend's house, and it was I think our Mother's Day, after we announced it, was like they were AWOL for Mother's Day.
Yeah.
They were so upset.
It was not a pretty time for our family.
They identified as Texans, not as Oklahomans.
Well, and just to tell you what was going on in our family before we moved is the girls in particular were moving into junior high and high school. We were looking at better educational possibilities for them in Dallas. And, being a big city, you've got to do a lot to try to be on top of things there. And so we were looking at private school options, applying there, doing interviews and whatnot, and just really praying about the direction, that God wanted to take in our family. So when this opportunity came up, and I came up to Bartlesville to do that spiritual gift assessment with that core team, it was like God opened my eyes and showed me this is the answer to the prayers you've been praying for your family. Now, I would not have thought moving and planting a church would ease the stress in our life that we were experiencing in Dallas. But what it did do was provide an atmosphere of support that you really don't get in a big city, the smaller type of community. And another thing I'll mention is that when I came up to do that spiritual gift assessment, I saw what Rod had seen in this group of people. And I also saw that God was getting ready to do something really, really unique, that he was in the midst of it. And that's what really shifted my view, because as I said earlier, I was pretty adamant about no way am I going to go plant a church again. So it was just a really unique set of circumstances that God orchestrated in order to bring us here.
Well, and then back to the kids, I think, as I recall, our kids were going to go to 4 separate schools. Like they were accepted into different different private schools and 2 different public schools.
So I was going to be spending my whole life in the car, which did not sound like
And then we
fun.
found out the school system here was very good. And we thought, oh, okay. And I would say, too, that we had gotten to the point where we had said to each other, the most important thing for us is family. That's the most important thing. And we will do anything to build into our kids, to build into our family. That was number one. That was more important than career. It was more important than finances. It was number one was more important than where we lived. We wanted to flourish and thrive as a family. And who knew that would happen in the city, but it did. And we are incredibly grateful looking back on that. Because by God's grace, our 4 kids and their spouses are thriving.
Mm-hmm.
And they're thriving in part because of what they encountered here at Grace Community Church. Sometimes you hear about pastors' kids who kind of go by the wayside. This was really, really transformative for our kids.
Yeah. And so when the church officially started, it was 1995.
Yep.
And for the first few years, you guys, this building didn't exist, and a lot of those things didn't exist. But before you had your first, official service, and a lot of those things were kind of starting to ramp up. What were some of the thoughts that were going through your head? Were there any fears or worries? What were some things that maybe you guys were excited? You talked about a little bit of it, but what were some specific things that maybe you were excited about being able to do, with that group of people that you were connecting with?
Well, just to start off, we spent we came up here. I think it was July 4th weekend, and I was actually on vacation with 2 of our kids with my parents. Well, Cindy moved the family up. That was great for me. Not sure we do that again, but that was great for me. And I think you enjoyed it too, because you had your best friend coming up and helping out. But we spent from July 4th to September the 10th developing an elder board. That was number one. And we had an elder board retreat where we spelled out the vision values of the church. And so we spent the first several months just preparing, for the launch that was going to be on September 10th. And then we did the launch, and I would say a lot of the first months were all about leadership and forming the vision, and letting people know why we were here, what made our church different than every other church in the city, and then me getting to meet as many people as I possibly could, and I think you had the same. We had young kids, so it was easy for us to meet
especially
people.
Once school started, it was really easy to meet a lot of new people. But the wives of the core team just did an amazing job of connecting me with people. I just felt like this was the most incredibly friendly community we had ever lived in. And of course, there was an excitement going on because we were planning a church and people were invested in that. But it really was almost a really special honeymoon time for us, I think, when we first moved here.
You became a den mother pretty soon.
Right, yeah. So our boys were involved with Cub Scouts in Dallas before we moved here. And so, they needed somebody to lead the den that Jared was going to be in. And so then I recruited all the kids from the families that started the church to join our den. And so we just had a lot of different interactions together as couples that just really solidified that, just that unity and sense of excitement. I think that God was doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the things. I've never lived in a place bigger than Bartlesville myself. And so for me, you get used to. It's hard to be a stranger. In a smaller community, and the longer you're there, the more, I guess the more people recognize you and things like that, and. Bartlesville, I don't know what it would have been like at the time, but in my experience, it's the religious atmosphere, the way, that nonprofits and churches and different things operate in this town is, to me, unusual. Do you feel like a lot of that stuff was able to help the church, help Grace kind of start and move ahead and progress? And, what kind of things did you guys get involved with as a church early on to try and help, build Grace Community Church?
Probably the most significant thing was small groups. When we arrived, there was a feeling among people in the city that the churches were, they might have been good, they might have been, been struggling. But one of the things that we kept hearing over and over again was nobody's really doing small groups. And so we started off as a small group church. And our goal was to have 100% of the people who were going to Grace be in small groups. And, that happened early on. We had a tremendous, small group presence. And so we had a good number of people who came in through small groups who were really transformed through small groups, people who came back and said, I was transformed at Grace through small groups. So small groups really was a tremendous foundation that we had when we got here. And we spent a lot of time investing in small group leaders and training people on how to do that. That was a great experience in those first 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. And so, as you're doing a lot of that stuff, you guys, when you first started the church, for the first 5 years, you were meeting at Tri-County Tech, correct?
First 4 years.
First 4 years.
Yeah.
What did the process look like of, moving into a permanent space, and what were some of those challenges? I feel like that was maybe another milestone for the church.
Yeah, well, that's actually when I came on staff, because Mandy, who had previously led our children's ministry, was moving to Dallas to go to school. And so I came on to replace her, which also happened to coincide with having space for a building or for classrooms and not to have to tear down every week and do all of that. So it was huge to move into this building. After 4 years of doing that, and I know some churches do it for years and years, but that added stuff of set up and tear down each week is exhausting. And so I think we were all ready to kind of get settled and be in our new space. But it was great. Of course, was half the size of what our building is now, but we had 4 rooms for small kids, and then a couple larger rooms for doing things with the older kids. And we had a really vibrant kids ministry. That's what I'll speak to, since that's what I was involved in, because all of us had younger kids. I mean, I think our girls were probably the oldest at the time when we moved here, so there really wasn't anything for youth at the time at our church. But everybody was involved in children's ministry. And so it was really a fun time to be a part of that. You might want to speak to other aspects.
Well, yeah, when we were at Tri-County Tech, they told us you can be here for an unspecified period of time, and then you'll probably have to leave. And so that unspecified period of time was specified, and they said, okay, you've got however long it was, 6 months to a year. I forget how long it was. So we took the step of having a stewardship campaign and raising money to build a new building on this piece of property. And we didn't have that many people at the time, but we raised $1.1 million, and everybody was shocked. I mean, that's like incredulous that we were able to do that. And there was maybe a few big gifts, but it was amazing how everybody just came together and they wanted to invest in this church. And so we built this church. We did have some debt. We carried some debt that we slowly paid off. And then Conoco and Phillips merged. And in the fall, I think it was 2002 through 2003, we lost a lot of people. I mean, it was really hard. We lost a lot of people to Houston, to Tempe, to various places, in Alaska and Norway and places like that. That was rough. So we had 7 years of tremendous growth, and then that crisis took place, and we had to do some rebuilding. But after we built this building, we recognized that we needed a lot more space, and so I think it was probably 2 years later we had another stewardship campaign, and we built out the rest of the current building that we have here. And so that was a fast and furious time for our church.
Yeah. That, speaking to that, smaller town dynamic again, that's the other part of it is, sometimes the economy of that community can can rest on just maybe one or two businesses, and major changes, can just completely change the landscape. And so the fact that, you guys were able to adjust and figure out, how to navigate some of that, and then to still continue to grow in spite of it. Other churches might not, have been able to, do that, or they wouldn't have, had that opportunity. Around that time, for people who may be wondering, from the late 90s, early 2000s, Grace Community Church is a non-denominational church. We're not tied to any other organization, any other, governing body, structure, anything like that. Was that unusual at the time here in Bartlesville? It's something that's very common, with churches to have something that's, an independent church. But what did that do for Grace early on?
Well, let me back up one second. Tell you something that really helped us in that period after Conoco and Phillips merged. I had just done a funeral for David Castleberry, who was, I think he may have been the executive vice president. He was high up at ConocoPhillips, and Caroline, his wife, is a wonderful member of our church right now. But I'd done his funeral. He had died of brain cancer. And Jim Muller, who's the CEO of it was Phillips Petroleum at the time, he spoke at the funeral. So I thought I've got a chance to talk to him. I emailed him that afternoon and I said, "Hey, can we connect?" And he graciously spent 2 hours with me. And one of the things he did was he assured me, thinking that I probably represented a good number of pastors in the city, that he would not abandon the city of Bartlesville. And I deeply appreciated that. And that led to a series of email conversations back and forth, where he was just very gracious in assuring us that the city of Bartlesville, they fully intended to be active in the city of Bartlesville. And so I think that gave us a lot of courage during some of that trying time to say, we're going to try new things. We're going to do different things, and trust that God will bring people back into our church as the city grows in different ways and in new ways. So that was a pretty significant component of our story. But you talk about different non-denominational churches. I think we were the only one at first.
There might have been that other one that, but I can't remember the name of it
can't
right
either.
now. It's Chuck McCarthy's church.
Oh yeah. There was the
He
Bible
was
Church
here.
Bartlesville. Yeah. That's right. There was. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
So I think, and you can, here in Bartlesville, you have some denominations who have a lot of ties to Bartlesville,
Right.
and different things like that. Wesleyan, the Wesleyan
Sure.
Church
Yep.
comes to mind.
Mhm.
And so I think you talked about, like, doing small groups, and there's that aspect of being non-denominational. Some of those things that maybe made you guys stand out in certain ways. Thinking about what you were doing early on, as you entered into kind of like the halfway point. What were some of the things that you were looking at doing that were different and new, and maybe a little more bold? And I think either one of you can probably speak to some of that.
Yeah. Well, of course, 10 years into it was when we launched Celebrate Recovery. And so that was a unique ministry to our community. And at that point in time, the ministry nationally had been going on for a while, but it still was kind of in its birthing stage, getting ready to explode. So we kind of got in on a little bit more of the ground floor level, especially in Oklahoma. So I had the opportunity to connect with some of the key leaders in Oklahoma and then nationally, which really helped, I think, give us a good foundation for our Celebrate Recovery ministry. And then in the years to come, I was able to be one of the Oklahoma state reps to help other Celebrate Recoveries in our area. I was involved with the northeastern Oklahoma part of the state to assist other churches as they were launching their Celebrate Recovery programs.
And I think that was a really amazing time for our church as well, because it's not easy to talk about issues of recovery in a lot of churches, because sadly sometimes churches engage in appearance management, and the goal is to not say stuff that could be vulnerable or awkward or quirky. And so we were trying to build in a culture during that time where we could do that, and that would be okay. And so we had some people who weren't too sure about this, and so we had a little bit of pushback at the time. But what we realized in time was that as people recognized this was a safe place, people began to come to our church because of Celebrate Recovery, and that was a gratifying learning that we began to have. And we talk about our ministry mission being transformation. Transformation really significantly began with that CR ministry. We saw it in discipleship for sure, but when Celebrate Recovery started, we started seeing people who were making incredible changes in their lives, marriages that were being saved, people being delivered from alcohol abuse and substance abuse. And it wasn't just drugs and alcohol, it was anger and divorce recovery and issues related toward pornography and what some people call love and relationship addiction, where they just couldn't connect relationally with people. And so those kinds of transformations caused our church to become well known in the community, and we try to create. And Cindy's really the hero in this. We try to create really good relationships with other churches, so that they knew, if we send our people to your CR, are you going to recruit them into your church? And Cindy was really good at saying no. We're going to honor the fact that they are members of your church, and I think that built some comfort for other churches, saying, okay, we're going to trust you and send people your way.
Yeah. And I think, the fact that you two specifically were so involved with that when it started, I think that probably also helped, because I think, there can be the perception of, the pastor and his wife are perfect and they've got everything together.
We shattered that stereotype right quick.
and so it's either I can't live up to that, or there's something going on that I don't know. There can always be these different things that are running through people's heads. But you like you said, you guys, were also involved with that, not just on the executing level, but just being a part of it.
Yeah.
And doing that. And I know, in your testimonies that you guys have talked about, in CR, which, if people are interested in listening to those sorts of things, then you need to talk to Tracy and figure out how you can hear those things. But, the fact that it was able to transform your family and you guys specifically, I think that's one of the things that has maybe impacted people's perceptions too, is to see, they really believe in X, Y, or Z. I mean, be it CR, transformation, authenticity, to see, it's happening from the top down. I think you can just, completely, change perceptions of that. And you guys proved that you were, willing to do whatever it took, whether it was children's ministry or CR, to start those things and to do those things.
And I would say the elders too, were amazing in that they saw the changes taking place in us. They were flowing with those changes. our elders over the years have had a tremendous combination of theological orthodoxy along with emotional and psychological flexibility. Bible's always the root of all we do. Always that. But then, there's some flexibility in terms of how you apply certain things. And I think as they saw us making the changes that we made, I think they were willing to flow with that as well and be incredibly supportive. And I look, I don't think we're a couple who knows how to, manage appearances. Some people are really good at that. We
tried, but we didn't do a very good job.
We are not good at that. And so when the authenticity part comes out, what we were finding was that we would hear this over and over again. People would go, "Hey, I've never told anybody else this, but," and then we would hear their story. And that came because Cindy led the way in this, because Cindy was so open about her story that led me to be more open about my story and our story. And so I'm getting calls from people who are executives in the corporate world to people who own small business and say, "I've never told anybody else this, but I think you're going to understand what I'm going through because I know your story." And so it was really ministry on the foundation of authenticity, and that's what we just loved, and that's what changed our kids too.
But I think also, when we go back to originally planting this church on the basis of small groups, what was underlying in that was that authenticity. And so we had a foundation for that. And I don't think we necessarily got away from that. We just kind of took it to another level when we started Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah, we certainly had the value for authenticity, but maybe did not know fully how to execute that value until Celebrate Recovery. Because really, I work the steps. If I'm going to ask the church to work the steps, I better work the steps too. What did I know about working the steps? I called the guy to be my sponsor. I said, I got to work the steps if I'm going to lead the church to do this. And I said, let's work the steps with me. Be my sponsor. I said, we can knock this out in like 12 weeks. And he said, "Rod, it does not work that way." So I worked with him for 4 years. And during that 4-year time, I'm working things for me. Cindy's working things for her. And I'm telling you, it just brought us together in such a powerful way that the staff saw it, our kids saw it. One time, one of our staff, who's not here anymore, said, What's going on with you? Like, you're different." I said, "In a good way or a bad way?" And this person said, "No, in a really good way. Like, what's happening?"
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we talk about now is being able to encounter transformation in the context of a family, and going through a journey that's not always just going to be the highs.
Yeah.
Right.
And Christian experience isn't always about the highs. There's lows and there's things that God confronts in ourselves. And, you get a lot of that through, the small groups or CR, being able to be open with other people in community, as a body of Christ. And so, that what started then and then built now, I think has kind of taken us to where we're at this point in time, and through all of that, if you're thinking about the scope of 25 years, what were some of the hardest things? What were some of the things that God, challenged you? And it could be, in ministry, personally, or whatever. But what were some of the moments where you're thinking, I need God more than ever in this moment to, lead and serve Grace Community Church?
Well, I would say for me, it was the transition of being a full-time mom to then being the mom that her kids were, the empty nester, the one where the kids were leaving and starting off on their own. And really the key thing for me with the issues I dealt with in Celebrate Recovery were all related to that. Was regrets of, I wished I'd spent more time with the kids doing this. I wish I didn't act this way then, and whatnot. And it was just a real difficult period of time for me that just kind of blindsided me. And it did. It brought me to my knees. And it was really another transformative time in my life personally. But then God also used it then to start the ministry. So.
Yeah. I would say one of the other things that comes to mind was when Conoco and Phillips merged and we lost all those people to different cities. Nobody knew what the city would become. We didn't know what was going to happen in the churches. And so we just plunged into our ministry in Cuba. I mean, we invested so much time and effort. We were going twice a year. We were taking people down there. We were taking materials down there. We were writing things and getting translated into Spanish to take them down there. And so having had real successes in Cuba for about 3 years, from 03 to 06, maybe 07, 3.5, 4 years. Ed Schmidt and I came back from a Cuba trip one time and we said, what if we thought about Bartlesville, Oklahoma, the way we think about Cuba? How would our ministry change? And at the same time, I was getting my doctorate at Dallas Theological Seminary, and so I did my dissertation on how do churches begin to see their communities in a missional way. And so we went into a good 7 years of just actively serving in the community, and we did things like renovate the teachers' lounge at the mid-high. I think we painted probably 3/4 of the entire inside of the mid-high. We pulled gum off the bottom of the tables, and we were doing this not because we thought we just want to serve. We were doing this because we wanted to serve and reflect the value of Jesus, and we had no agenda. We just wanted to serve. And then one day, the principal of the school says, "Hey, by the way, here's the key, the master key to the mid-high. Whatever you guys want to do to paint, clean up, whatever you want to do, you do it." We said, "Okay, we'll do it." And that went great. And then about 6 months later, he said, "Hey, do you guys want to do mentoring for at-risk kids? And by the way, if you want to share your faith, that's fine." So we thought, wow, like if we had said, "Hey, we want to go to the high school and have them give us their master key." and then we want to mentor the kids,
Yeah.
Like they would have said, "Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. That'll never happen." But serving with no strings attached opened up some doors that never would have come otherwise. And that was a really fun season of our ministry and learning just the power of selfless service.
Yeah. One of the things that, people will probably get after hearing this is that, a lot of what's happened at this church has kind of happened in phases, and you can look back at different, points in time, and, some of it could have been, based off staff dynamics of who was there at the time, or it could have been based off of, what was going on in your guys' lives personally, or any of those sorts of things. But I think too, you can see we're just different things that God wanted Grace Community Church to do. And so, thinking about, kind of the late 2000s into kind of where we're at now, what were some of the things that you felt like God was wanting Grace Community Church to do or represent in Bartlesville, Oklahoma?
Well, I think for me, leading the care and recovery ministry, I kind of transitioned. I was working, kind of overseeing adult ministries and small groups. And then when Celebrate Recovery became such a big ministry here at the church, we readjusted my job to focus on that. But I realized Celebrate Recovery wasn't the only way to help people. And so I started looking at things that maybe other churches were doing and were not doing, so that we weren't reinventing the wheel or, trying to compete with anyone else. And so Stephen Ministry was another ministry that we brought along where we really reached out to the community quite a bit. And our church did a great job of promoting it in the community when someone was going through just a challenging time in their life and they just needed someone to talk to. Not that they had to go see a counselor per se, they just needed someone to listen to them. And so we trained over those years probably about 50 Stephen ministers, and it was quite a lengthy process, but it was a good way to kind of balance out what CR offered versus what still was needed to help people. And then, I saw it as like a three-legged stool. And the third piece of that stool was our healing prayer ministry. And I can't remember the year that we started that. Seems like it was in the 2010, 2011, something like that. And that was yet another piece because I realized, you could work the steps and celebrate recovery. You could meet with a Stephen minister and get some help. But sometimes there was just some deeper issues that with spiritual warfare and things where you just needed someone to come alongside and really pray on your behalf. And so that, I think, was kind of the culmination, at least in my area of ministry during that season, was that healing prayer. And that has continued to thrive even during the pandemic here. We've still been able to keep that ministry going. We have to do it a little differently because of the social distancing and all of that. But I really feel like that ministry really kind of undergirded what we were doing there.
I mean, before COVID, I think we were having four plus per week.
Sometimes, yeah, it kind of would go through seasons of highs and lows, but yeah, there would be, certainly quite a number of people interested in that. And
I think, Garrett, in this post-COVID environment, we're not totally post-COVID yet, are we? In this COVID environment, I think we're in a new phase. Our transformation is still the rock of what we're doing, and you've led us in that phase in a cool way with with our online ministry. You're our pastor of online ministries, and you are doing amazing work in this area, leading us into ways that we could not have done, and we love what you're doing, and the fact that we have people from tuning in from India, Central America, Africa, the Caribbean, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Florida, Atlanta. I mean, we didn't ever think we would have an opportunity to do that. And during the time of when we had our lockdown for I think it was probably 10 weeks, you were, racing around the auditorium, developing new things every week. And we are definitely in this new phase of striving to provide really good online ministry. And that's every bit a significant phase as starting CR and doing the missional work that we did strongly for 7 years. New phase, new excitement, and gosh, just really, really appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I think it shows. If you think about the story, it shows that you guys were able to be in tune with what God's wanting and to be flexible, because I think so many people could look at what church is for them in their head based off of either what they've learned in school, what they've grown up with, X, Y, or Z, and to say, I'm going to do church this way. I'm going to teach this way. I'm going to have these ministries or these programs or whatever, and I'm going to run it, the same way I would run anything else. And I think that really hasn't happened here because of the openness of what you guys have done and the elders have done to say, what is God wanting in this moment, in this place and time, and I think that has probably been huge, and to allow God to do more than what you think that you're even capable of doing. Thinking about that part of it and maybe where we're at now, and the fact, Cindy, you've been retired now for just a little bit. What do you guys see happening in the future, moving forward, you've gone 25 years. 25 years to me is a long time.
How old are you, Jared?
I remember 1995. No, not at all. And to think about, where you've been, where is it that you want to see Grace go moving forward? What are your hopes and dreams for Grace? The next year, next 5 years, next 25 years, whatever it may be.
A really big one is the new building that we're planning. I mean, we had our stewardship campaign in the early part of this year, January through March, and the name of that campaign was Transforming the Next Generation. That came directly out of the fact that we've had, young adults who were kids who grew up here at Grace saying, this church was the key to me going the distance with Christ, and great. Thank you, Lord. We are grateful for that. When a lot of people are bailing out of church, God, for whatever reason, in His grace, allowed us to be a source of equipping to young adults, who are now doing great, and they're now in their churches, they're discipling their kids. So, we want to transform the next generation, and a building's not going to do it, but a building can be a conduit for good things to happen. Mm-hmm. This building did not transform the people from 25 years ago, but it was the context for that to happen. And so we want to create the context where that can happen. And the main thing about this new building is it's going to be a kids ministry area, and it's going to be a youth area, and it's going to be something that allows Celebrate Recovery to expand and grow, because they have a children's and youth area with CR as well. CR is one of our great ways of reaching out into the community. And so really, what we see in the future is we want to help transform the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, where I've been at in the past 5 years, I've seen, the way we use the building, the things that we're doing, and I've been able to see certain groups and ministries and things like that grow. And I think it's, for me, it's so interesting to see that, happen just in my, short amount of time. And so I can't imagine, how you guys feel being able to look back and know that it wasn't all easy, but to say, we've been able to do all of this. We've been able to be a part of it, and God brought us in, and I took it's a step of faith to do that. And so, I know a lot of people appreciate, you guys and the openness that you've had to do that. And I think that, hopefully, we're able to continue to engage with all of you guys, whether you're at home or you're coming into the building, so that, you still feel, part of Grace Community Church, and there's always new things that are going to be starting. But to kind of close things out, is there anything for people that have made it this far, that you would like to say, just about your own, experience, your own story, or just, how you feel about Grace Community Church?
Well, I think I would just like to say, just saying yes to God. You don't know what all that means, but just as we've reflected over this time talking, it just really humbles me just to see that God has really done a lot through this church and through the people of this church over the last 25 years. And to be a part of that, we took a risk when we moved here to plant the church, and just to see all that God has done and to reflect on that is just really humbling and very gratifying.
Yeah, Bartlesville is a unique city. I mean, it has disproportionate influence around the world relative to its size, and that's why it's really fun to be here. I mean, it is the most unique city that I've ever had the privilege of living in. I've grew up in New York, and and lived out in LA, and we love it here. And part of it is because this city, has that disproportionate influence, around our country and around our world. I don't know how many people really seize upon that, but we've seen that over and over. But here's what I often text to Cindy after I've had a really good meeting. I'll say to Cindy, sweetheart, I love what I do. I love where I do it. I love with whom I do it. And there are times where I might say that to her like 3 times a week, like I love what I get to do. And I've loved doing it with her. But I've also loved doing it with our staff, and it's a privilege to be involved in kingdom work with people that you love, that you really care about. And I'll say it again, you're a big part of that because what you're doing, bringing us into, robust online ministry is huge, Garrett. It's huge. And we really esteem you for the great work you're doing in that area.
Well, I think that, that's probably a good place to stop. I know that if we really wanted to, we could probably get into the weeds, and this could be a 5-part series.
Yeah.
But for now, I think this is a good place to put a pin in it. And obviously, it's not done yet. The story's still going.
Right.
Yep.
You guys are still very active in what's going on, and there's a lot that can happen and a lot that we're praying for God to do here at Grace Community Church, and so I'm grateful to have been a part of just a small piece of it. I know that there's probably a lot of other people who feel the same way. And for people that are listening, I've said this to people that have, served with me and done different ministries with me, like, none of what any of us have done would have been possible without you guys.
Yeah.
The church isn't any one person. It's us as a body, under Christ.
Yep.
And so I guess if you're saying it's under one person, it's under Christ alone. And, I just appreciate your guys' example, seeing what you've done and, getting to work with both of you, and having that privilege has kind of given me, perspective on how I lead and how I am a pastor as well, and in different ways, and to do it in a unique way that God called me to, and God, you guys have your own unique way of doing things in your ministry, and so. I'd encourage you all, if you've made it this far and you'd like to learn more, or maybe you heard a little bit about something, maybe even you heard about a ministry that's still going on and you want to be a part of that, you want to know more about it, reach out to any of us and let us know, what God's prompting you to do in the midst of, service and in the midst of ministry, because any one of us, any person from, the person that watches babies, the person that makes coffee, it's all part of the ministry that happens.
Exactly.
And, so just, thank you guys again for watching these, listening. These are really awesome for me to get to listen to and be a part of. And obviously, it's because I've been able to hear parts of these stories myself. And I'm just glad that I get to share that with you guys a little bit. And so if you want to learn more about Grace and what we're about, you can find us online. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook at gccbartlesville. You can find more of these stories anywhere that you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. And you can find all the links to all of that, more information about the ministries, the story of Grace Community Church on our website, gccbartlesville.org. Thank you again for listening, sharing this, and doing all of that stuff. And we will talk to you real soon.